Welcome once again then to RWR Plays TEW 2020. This is chapter 23 of our WCW Lives On series, where we're playing as Eric Bischoff, heading up WCW after Fusion Media Ventures bought the company in 2001 as opposed to WWE in this alternative universe. And we have got another episode of Nitro for you today. We're 2 weeks out from the Lethal Lottery, which is a two-night tournament that will be taking place as this month's pay-per-view, with the winner getting a world title shot at Halloween Havoc. If you've been enjoying the series up to this point, please give us a subscribe. That's really helpful and does wonders for us, and also is a great bit of feedback from me as somebody who's making these videos. And we are quite a long way into the series. As I said, chapter 23 today. Now, last week on Nitro, we had Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire in their match with Totally Buff for the WCW Tag Team titles, acknowledging that it was probably their last chance to win the gold, and unfortunately, due to the interference of the Gothic Collective, they were unsuccessful. After the match, it appeared O'Haire's frustration at their loss got the better of him when he stormed out of the ring without his partner. Also on last week's show, we had Toshiaki Kawada making his debut, having been introduced to WCW by Agent Don Callis, who is apparently an agent for a lot of Japanese wrestlers. Scott Steiner and Booker T engaged in a wild brawl after Steiner once more accused Booker T of ducking his challenge ever since the relaunch of the company. We also saw Shane Douglas issue an open challenge, which was answered by Tommy Dreamer, but Douglas got the win with a handful of tights. And finally, we had DDP defeating Kevin Nash in a match that it was hoped would put the issues within the insiders behind them, but after losing the match, a dejected Kevin Nash first of all shoved another referee, and then secondly attacked his partner, leaving him lying in the ring at the conclusion of last week's Monday Nitro. Also previously advertised for this week's show, we've got Booker T defending the WCW title against Jeff Jarrett, and Curt Henning will face Lance Storm in the no interference, no time limit match. Both of those matches taking place on Nitro. Also on Saturday night, which will be covered as part of this taping, the semi-finals of the Hot Prospect tournament will take place as the Amazing Red takes on Mike Knox and Teddy Hart battles Bobby Roode. So that's everything you need to know going into this episode, and we will now go into Nitro. And you can see for the first time in the game, I believe, in our save, we are in Connecticut. We're in the Converse Center Ballroom, maybe. I don't know what the CONV stands for. Could be anything. But anyway, we're in Connecticut for this one. And we start with a little dark match as Nick Gage and Jimmy Jacobs take on Chris Cage and Alpha Jr. These were all the losers in the quarterfinals of the Hot Prospects tournament. You can see here Chris Cage and Alpha Jr. get the victory when Alpha pins Jimmy Jacobs. A segment rating of 20. Jimmy Jacobs' performance of 25, so he was really good. Nick Gage, not too bad either. But obviously these guys are all low in popularity and experience, so never expected to be massive, and whatever the case, it was a dark match, so it didn't matter too much. We go into Nitro proper now. And we start with Tony Schiavone stood with Eric Bischoff in his office. You'll notice I'm trying to mix up a little bit the way the show starts each week. Schiavone says that Bischoff has asked him here today because he wishes to address the situation unfolded last week with Kevin Nash again assaulting an official, not to mention his former partner Diamond Dallas Page. Bischoff says that's right. He says he's reviewed the footage and would ordinarily suspend Kevin Nash for putting his hands on a WCW official, but we've already done that and it didn't change a thing. So instead, he's docking Nash 2 weeks' pay, but making him work anyway. He then says that last week's victory for Diamond Dallas Page was a big one, and that is why, as reward for such a high-profile victory, DDP will get a second crack at the United States title on next week's Nitro against Mike Awesome in the main event of the show. Schiavone then shifts gears and asks Bischoff about how the entries for the Lethal Lottery are shaping up. Bischoff says that in addition to Ric Flair's announcement last week that he will be competing, he can confirm that Shane Douglas, Vampiro, Bam Bam Bigelow, Sean O'Haire, Chuck Palumbo, Lex Luger, Buff Bagwell and Tommy Dreamer will all be competing, and he understands 2 major names will be making announcements tonight about their entry into the event. So, segment rating here of 61, and this was just a way to address the situation that took place at the end of last week's Nitro, and also set up next week's Nitro main event, which will see Diamond Dallas Page challenging Mike Awesome for the US title. So in the opening match of the night, in his superb match, Lance Storm defeated Curt Hennig in 22 minutes and 5 seconds by pinfall. This got a segment rating of 76. Lance Storm was phenomenal, performance of 82, Hennig a 70, and this was really, really great. They have great chemistry, and it showed in their performance. One of the best matches we've seen, and certainly for such an earlier point in the show. I did even consider putting this in the main event spot because I thought it would be very good, but I wasn't sure it was going to be this good. So that's a massive, massive win for everybody involved. And this is despite the fact that we still have that issue with Curt Hennig where the game thinks he's a heel, and so this was a heel versus heel match. And without that, it might even have been a better segment rating than we got in the end. Then after the match, Curt Hennig approaches Lance Storm and reaches out his hand to shake. Storm accepts the handshake. So a segment rating here of 65, and Lance Storm and Curt Hennig showing some respect for one another after their killer match here on Nitro. Next on the show, Sharmell Sullivan is backstage and joined by Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo for an interview. Sharmell asks the pair whether they have had a chance to reflect on their loss last week against Totally Buff. Sean O'Haire says that he thinks he better say something because he didn't handle losing very well last week. He apologises to Palumbo for storming out, saying that wasn't the way to carry yourself, and says he will learn from his mistake. Palumbo says that he's grateful for O'Haire's words and would like to put it all behind them. He says they both know who was to blame for their loss last week, and it was the Gothic Collective. Sharmell then says that what our viewers don't know yet is that a match between the two teams, no holds barred, has already been booked for next week's Nitro. O'Haire says that's right, and together they're going to put the Gothic Collective down. So segment rating here 47. Neither O'Haire or Palumbo performed particularly well, but Sharmell did, so that's really good. And yes, this is just a way of announcing the fact that there is going to be a no holds barred match on next week's Nitro, which pits O'Haire and Palumbo against the Gothic Collective. Next, we had a short match between Terry Funk and Johnny Swinger, and in 7 minutes and 17 seconds, Terry Funk got the unsurprising victory. A segment rating here of just 44. Terry Funk's not that great in the ring, unfortunately, these days, and obviously Johnny Swinger has not been somebody we've focused on. This was just a way to give Terry Funk a bit of a victory. After the match, as Terry Funk is leaving the ring, Sharmell Sullivan catches up to him and congratulates him on victory. She then asks if Funk has any response to the comments that Nick Gage made on WCW Saturday Night last week, calling him and Tommy Dreamer his heroes. Funk says that that's undeniably flattering, but Gage needs to know that before he can throw weapons around and crack people over the head with steel chairs, he has to earn some respect, and there's only one way to do that, and it's get in the ring and fight hard and fair. Funk then walks off, and Sharmell thanks him for his words. So segment rating here 41. Terry Funk did pretty well during the segment, and that's just moved things along between, in terms of Nick Gage and what he's doing, another step. Next up, we have the Cruiserweight title match between Great Sasuke and Evan Karagias. And here, in a match that went 9 minutes and 34 seconds, Great Sasuke gets the victory by pinfall. That's his third defense of the WCW Cruiserweight title. A segment rating here, 59. Great Sasuke was pretty good with a 56, but Karagias only a 43. This was just a regulation title defense for the Great Sasuke as we position him ahead of the next couple of months. In the next segment, we have Tony Schiavone backstage and introducing his guests, at this time the Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions, the FBI, and their stablemate, Johnny the Bull. Schiavone says that we are just minutes away from what should be a very exciting three-way match to determine challengers to the FBI's Cruiserweight Tag Team titles next week here on Nitro, when Air Raid, Chaos Theory, and the Filthy Animals go to battle. Schiavone asks them which team they'd rather face. James Maritato says that whichever team ends up trying to take them on a turf war will lose out. He says they have already beaten Ray Jr. and Kidman for the belts, and they beat Air Raid a few weeks before that, so they have nothing to fear from any of them. Frankie Cicero then lifts up the head of a stuffed animal horse and asks Maritato where he wants him to put this. Maritato angrily rebukes Cicero and tells him not to give away their calling card on national television. Maritato then tells Schiavone that they will be watching the next match before motioning both Cicero and Johnny the Bull away from the scene. So another quirky little angle here between Schiavone and the FBI, but only a 36 this time in terms of a segment rating. Maritato and Cicero are actually pretty good, but Schiavone did not do well, unfortunately. So next it's on to that 6-man tag match: Kidman Ray Jr. against Air Raid against Chaos Theory, and the winners are Air Raid when AJ Styles pins Mikey Whipwreck in 12 minutes and 58 seconds. Rey Mysterio Jr. was obviously head and shoulders above everyone else in terms of his in-ring performance. Segment rating of 59, which is a little disappointing. Kidman of 66, Rey Mysterio of 80, Tajiri of 46, Whipwreck of 50, AJ Styles of 45, and Air Paris, the clear weak link with a 38. But yes, Air Raid go on to face the FBI next week on Nitro for the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles. In the next segment, we have Kevin Nash backstage for an interview with Tony Schiavone. Schiavone says that everybody heard earlier what Bischoff had to say at the top of the program. That firstly, Nash had been fined 2 weeks' wages, and secondly, that DDP will face Mike Awesome in a rematch for the US title next week on Nitro as a result of his victory over Nash last week. Nash says that 2 weeks' wages is like a drop in the ocean for him, and it was worth every penny just to knock down that useless piece of crap who passes for a referee. As for DDP, Nash says that he can have the US title because he is going to enter the Lethal Lottery, win the whole thing, then challenge whoever is champion at Halloween Havoc for the WCW World title. So segment rating here of 65, Kevin Nash announces his entry into the Lethal Lottery. The next match sees Scott Steiner against Jim Duggan, and this was another excellent match. Nothing specifically interesting about it other than the fact that Scott Steiner wins in 8 minutes and 13 seconds by submission, but a segment rating of 80. That's because Scott Steiner is an incredible in-ring performer at the moment. Duggan only 45, but Steiner was able to drag them to a really excellent match, one of the best matches we've had not only on Nitro but in WCW in general so far since the relaunch. Immediately after the match, Tony Schiavone enters the ring while Scott Steiner is celebrating his victory over Duggan to speak to him. Schiavone says that last week Steiner and Booker T had a wild brawl all over the arena, and that has led to speculation that Steiner might get involved in tonight's main event, which is just a few moments away, which sees Booker T defend the WCW title against Jeff Jarrett. Steiner says he has no reason to get involved tonight. He doesn't care who is champion, even if Booker T holds onto the belt, because at the Lethal Lottery he's going to win the tournament, and then Booker T won't be able to duck his challenges anymore. So segment rating here of 69, Schiavone underperformed. Steiner was both good and bad. There were various bits of his performance. He looked good, but struggled when going off script. So there you go. This was mainly in place, again, to get Steiner to announce his entry into the Lethal Lottery. And so we go to our main event. It's Booker T versus Jeff Jarrett for the WCW World title. And we have a new champion. In a bout that had fantastic heat and great wrestling, Jeff Jarrett defeated Booker T in 20 minutes and 45 seconds by pinfall following interference from John Cena. So what happens here is at a certain point in the match, Mike Sanders gets involved by hitting Booker T with a jawbreaker. Jarrett goes for a cover, but Booker manages to kick out. Then when Sanders attempts to interfere again, he is caught by the official and thrown out of the arena. However, eventually, with Jarrett bringing a chair into the ring, the referee reprimands him, and with the ref's attention taken by this, John Cena enters the ring and powerbombs Booker T behind the ref's back. Jarrett then hits the stroke and covers Booker T for the 1-2-3, and we have a new WCW World Champion. After the match, Jeff Jarrett, John Cena and Mike Sanders, all three members of the Jarrett administration, celebrate in the ring together as the show goes off the air. And a segment rating of 75, so way better than their match that took place at the last pay-per-view. Booker T an in-ring performance of 72, Jeff Jarrett a 76. Really pleased with this, and we have a new World Heavyweight Champion with Jeff Jarrett getting the victory in this one. So a pretty massive way to end a pretty brilliant show, actually. Lance Storm and Curt Henning had a great match. Steiner and Jim Duggan also having an exceptional match. A really good main event. Yes, some just amazing matches on this one. Plus, of course, some good segments here and there. We've increased our popularity in all of the regions, as we always hope for. An overall rating of 73. We've got to be very pleased with that indeed. And as I say, Jeff Jarrett is a new WCW World Heavyweight Champion. And I got to be honest, I did go back and forth on that particular decision for a very long time. I wasn't sure if I was going to give Jeff Jarrett the win or not. I kept reformulating future plans to fit in with this, but we've gone there. We've done it now. It's out there. So we're going to go and book WCW Saturday Night, and then we'll be bringing you that show straight away. Okay then, so it's on to WCW Saturday night that we go. We can see that we've got 1,916 people in the building for this particular TV taping in Connecticut. And the first match on Saturday night is an abysmal match where Amazing Red defeats Mike Knotts in 9 minutes and 16 seconds by pinfall with a quick roll-up. And this match was, of course, in the semi-final of the Hot Prospects tournament, so Amazing Red advances to the final. A segment rating here of only 18. Amazing Red had an in-ring performance of 30, which is pretty good. Mike Knotts only a 20. They had good in-ring chemistry, but the main problem here, of course, is that the fans just don't know enough about these two guys to really care about them, so it didn't really land particularly well. The final, of course, of the final of this tournament will be coming up on Nitro next week, so they will be really tested there when they're in front of the proper big crowd for Nitro. Next up, we have Tony Schiavone and Stevie Ray at the announce booth, and they talk about the upcoming Lethal Lottery and list off those already announced for taking part, including Ric Flair, Shane Douglas, Vampiro, Bam Bam Bigelow, Sean O'Haire, Chuck Palumbo, Lex Luger, Buff Bagwell, Tommy Dreamer, Kevin Nash, and Scott Steiner. Stevie Ray says that a number of additional names can now be revealed for the tournament that takes place over 2 nights. They are Curt Hennig, Lance Storm, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Rick Steiner, Jester Canyon, and both members of Air Raid. So a segment rating here of 45, and this was just another way to get out some names that are taking part in the Lethal Lottery. Next up, Mike Sanders takes on Jason Jett and gets a victory in 7 minutes and 51 seconds by pinfall. A segment rating here of 39. Sanders had an in-ring performance of 40. Jason Jett at 38. This was really just a match to capitalise on Mike Sanders' recent association with Jeff Jarrett, to keep him kind of being built as part of that whole story. Of course, Jeff Jarrett now the world champion. In the next segment, Sharmell Sullivan introduces back to Saturday Night Nick Gage. She asks Gage if he saw what Terry Funk said on Nitro this week. Gage said he did, and if Funk thinks he should step into the ring and fight hard, then maybe they should face one another. Before Gage can go any further, however, Tommy Dreamer interjects. He says that Gage hasn't come close to earning the chance to face a legend like Terry Funk in the ring, but he'll face Gage if he thinks he's up for it. Gage says that Dreamer is on. So we have a match on Nitro coming up next week, which will see Nick Gage against Tommy Dreamer. Segment rating here of 40. Tommy Dreamer was a real star, but Nick Gage underperformed. The reason I'm doing this, I'm just trying to, I think I've spoke about this on the last episode, but I'm just trying to integrate some of these sort of rookie guys into the rest of the stories and in the rest of the universe. I don't know how long they'll all be around. I only signed them initially to sort of a few months contracts, just to kind of see which ones could be of use to us in the longer run. And I just had something with Nick Gage where I just wanted to try something out, and this is what we're doing. So, and this was a pretty good segment, so I'm happy with this. So next, it's another match in the women's title round robin, segment rating of 14 as Amber O'Neil defeats Cara Slice. Going into this one, both had won 1 and lost 2. So Amber O'Neil now has 2 wins and 2 losses with that victory. Cara Slice was a 19, Amber O'Neil a 20, but still the crowd don't have any investment in the women, and this only got a segment rating of 14, which was a disappointment. Next up, we have a backstage interview where Sharmell Sullivan is with Amazing Red. She congratulates him on reaching the final of the Hot Prospects tournament and asks him how he feels. Amazing Red says he had always believed in himself, but is humbled by the response to his matches in the tournament so far. Sullivan says that next up is Teddy Hart versus Bobby Roode in the second semi-final, but regardless of who wins, does Amazing Red think he can do it and go all the way? Amazing Red says he has to have faith that he can. He knows that either way it will be a tough test, but he's ready to take it on. So segment rating here of 27. The Amazing Red was very poor when trying to improvise dialogue. Perhaps one of the reasons why he didn't make it to a mainstream organisation, really. And yeah, we just have to keep going with Amazing Red. He's gone on to the final. This wasn't a terrible segment, so decently happy, and I think he performed well in his match at least. So the second match in the Hot Prospects tournament this week sees Bobby Roode defeat Teddy Hart in 7 minutes and 39 seconds by pinfall with a handful of tights. Teddy Hart had an in-ring performance of 30. Bobby Roode only a 21. He was off his game as well for this one, so that was a shame. The segment rating therefore was only 18, and the crowd again turned off by having a match that they didn't have any investment in. And I think that's going to be a bit of a test for these guys as Bobby Roode and Amazing Red will face each other in the match on Nitro in the final of this tournament. I think that could be a really poor rating, but whatever the case, Bobby Roode has gone through and he will face the Amazing Red on Nitro next week in the final. And then finally, the main event of this show sees the European Union versus Chronic, and in a decent match, Chronic get the victory when Brian Adams pins Norman Smiley after 11 minutes and 37 seconds of action. A segment rating here 42. In fact, everybody in the ring was better than that, so I can only assume that the poor announcing by Stevie Ray was to blame, possibly also the fact that most of the matches on this particular episode of Saturday Night nobody really cared about. So did suffer a little bit, but Chronic get the victory here in the main event of the show. And that is this week's television taping. The Saturday Night show got an overall rating of 39, but as we've said many times before, it doesn't matter. Our popularity isn't affected by Saturday Night, and we're just trying to use it to get as many different guys some experience. So that's all good. And that is everything for this week, but it's been a pretty big week, obviously, with Jeff Jarrett becoming the new WCW World Champion, the first time since the beginning of the save that the titles actually changed hands. So that's a really big deal, and he's the new World Champion. We're just 2 weeks away, of course. Well, we're now, technically, for the next episode, we'll be on the Go Home Nitro for Lethal Lottery, so that's going to be quite interesting to see what happens, and all the fallout from the title change as well here. But yeah, a pretty big deal, this one. Let's just have a look through some of this news, because it looks like Raw is War is being shown at a later time slot, because France 5, their TV station in France, presumably, they weren't happy with the quality of the show, which again I find hard to accept given the quality of some of their shows in the past. And there's the same case for Italia 1, so perhaps not the best for Raw at the moment. Let's just have a look at Raw is War from last night. So a show rating of 81. Hogan defeating Devon Dudley in the main event. Kane defeating Rikishi and The Truth, which is the Ultimate Warrior, and Eddie Guerrero defeating Dangerous by Design, who are Raven and William Regal. Amazing stuff. Nitro Report, great feedback as per usual. Really happy with that. A good show. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about Jeff Jarrett becoming the new WCW World Champion. Any predictions for who will be his first opponent for the title, and any predictions, of course, for the Lethal Lottery. Who's going to come out and win that tournament? So that's everything for this week. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed today's show, give us a like down below, and of course, as I said before, give us a subscribe if you want to continue to follow along with the series. We'll be back at some point in the near future, but until then, thank you very much for watching.